All right, so I am very excited to welcome a special guest to the channel. We have none other than Holly Young, who is the co-founder of Bitonomy. Holly, welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you today. It's a real pleasure.
Absolutely. As a passionate Bitcoin educator myself, I wanted to have this conversation and have you share a little bit of what I think is a really, really interesting project and that I think a lot of people listening are going to find fascinating as well. But before we get too much into that, let's maybe start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into Bitcoin?
Sure, of course, of course. Gosh, it's actually becoming quite a long journey now, as the years go by. I think I first heard about Bitcoin in 2016. My then partner was a very keen Bitcoiner, and he introduced me to the idea. We just talked a lot at the time about money and finances in a very open and for me, a very educational way. I realized that a lot of people, perhaps especially a lot of couples, when they talk about money, it's really in the sense of how much money do we have, how much money do we need, but never on the level of what is money? What does it mean in our lives? Where does it come from? Is it manipulated? Is it real? Um, so when he was asking me questions, um, for example, about my knowledge of the gold standard, or if I knew a fractional reserve banking system was, I was actually really shocked to recognize that I got to a certain age in my life, into my 40s, without actually knowing any of the answers to any of these questions. And for me, that was a very shocking revelation. And I went through a process which I think a lot of Bitcoiners go through quite early in their journey of feeling, recognizing that I'd been tricked, recognizing that I'd been lied to, or not per se lied to, but that a lot of assumptions that I was making about money were based on nothing but shifting sand, and that I had no answers to a lot of these questions. So I got really interested, and I started going to a lot of Bitcoin meetups and then a lot of Bitcoin conferences, and just suddenly feeling, perhaps for the first time in my life, that I was not the odd one out, that I really found a community amongst Bitcoiners, which I guess I've been lacking, and it answered a lot of needs for me on an intellectual level, on a financial level, but also very much on an emotional level. I think I started to experience what community was, perhaps for the first time, having moved around a lot in my life. Yeah, it was a real homecoming, and perhaps you recognize it. Do you recognize it? Is that something that you've been through too?
100%. I think this sort of, twisting, winding road is one that, yeah, many of us have traveled. I love that the impetus for you was this, this sort of, this in a context with a partner. That's actually, I think, really interesting. And to your point, money is so central in that type of dynamic, but also so ubiquitous throughout our lives. It's become almost invisible in the sense that every economic transaction, one half of that is money, and yet we haven't taken, or many people haven't taken the time to really ask those deeper questions. And I do think that I have a very similar path in the sense that, you know, very libertarian minded, free markets, this and that. And so those were some of the traits that I gravitated to very early. But the community aspect, as you said, we met, of course, in down in Costa Rica, Bitcoin Freedom Festival. I keep shilling that on these videos for people to, assuming they do it again next year, what a special experience that was. Because I do think a lot of people who maybe are on Twitter, X, whatever, who don't necessarily have, friends and family in their lives who they're talking to about these concepts. There's this real, almost existential need to be able to connect with people in the real world about some of these ideas. And so I do think that community element is a humongous part of all of this. They talk about the social layer or however we want to put it. And so that for me, even as recently as these last few weeks, has been extremely transformational in my journey, thinking I know a fair bit about Bitcoin, but it's like this community aspect is so, so powerful, arguably equally as powerful as kind of the protocol in and of itself.
Absolutely. I really couldn't agree more. Um, I mean, for me, just to go back to the shilling of the Freedom Festival, for me, it's just a wonderful experience. And
Yeah,
also, I think it says a huge amount that as a woman traveling alone with my teenage daughter, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind. You know, you might think you're putting yourself, it's the other side of the world for me, right? I live in
yeah,
Portugal. You might think to yourself, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position, traveling alone as a woman with your teenage daughter. And yet it did not cross my mind for one single second that we might be unsafe amongst the Bitcoin community. It really is it's a, well, I don't want to glorify it too much, but you know, it's like it's a real homecoming. I felt so proud to introduce my daughter there, and for her to see what a warm welcome that we all got there. She even commented that the kinds of conversations that you have with other Bitcoiners at an event like that, they're just totally other level. I always
yeah,
feel that somehow amongst Bitcoiners you can kind of skip the small stuff.
yeah.
You don't need to negotiate what do you think about governments. You don't need to negotiate what did you think about Corona. What did you think about what do you like to eat. You know, we'll eat steak. We've all got a very similar mindset about governments and conformism. I think we're all quite non-conformist. We're all willing to ask some quite profound questions, which perhaps not just about money anymore. Of course, as you will know, it goes well beyond money at a certain point. Once you start questioning money and where that comes from, you start questioning all kinds of aspects
Yeah.
of life. And you don't need to negotiate that with other Bitcoiners. It's a wonderful experience.
Yes. Yes. No, there is a common foundation of values, and I've heard people summarize it as like if there's one thematic principle, at least that I've seen, it's this difference between low and high time preference. And I as a somewhat of a nonconformist, I almost have a knee-jerk reaction to some of what appears to be groupthink within the Bitcoin community. You're like, wait a
Yep.
second, is it right that we all like this and this and this? And yet, I think a lot of those specific elements fall out of this broader principle of low time preference in a very interesting way. So I'm sure we could get into that a lot more deeply, but I think what you're saying is resonating a lot. Let's now get a little bit into Bitonomy. I'm really eager to learn a little bit more and ask you about that. Talk to us about maybe the start of the project, and sort of how how you came up with the idea and what are some of the things you guys are working on currently?
Sure. Well, it actually ties in very nicely to what we've just been talking about. I was invited to the Freedom Festival as a speaker to talk about community, actually. And Bitonomy is a real follow-on from that. I'd just like to go back to something that you said earlier. You were saying that you recognize the importance of finding community not only online. So at a certain point, I realized that my Bitcoin interactions and the kind of depths of interactions that you can have with other Bitcoiners were really happening for me online and at Bitcoin conferences. And I just realized that I was really hungry for more than that. And I also felt, yeah, I'm a little bit careful about using kind of religious language around Bitcoin. I think it's a bit of a tendency. I'm not sure exactly what I mean, but I think there's a bit of a trap in there somewhere. But I really felt a kind of moral drive in a way. Once I'd started asking questions about what is money, what does it mean, where do we come from, I actually felt something of a kind of moral drive to start asking other people around me these questions and to discuss and interact on that level. And also, well, to put it frankly, to evangelize and to educate people about what I was coming up against, and to say to people who did have a lot of faith in the legacy banking system, hey, have you thought about this? Have you really, do you know certain facts about the history of, I think reading, for example, the Bitcoin Standard was genuinely life-changing for me. I've never been the same since I read that book. And it really gave me a huge push to debate these topics with people and to communicate with people about certain assumptions that I used to hold and I see them still holding. let's be frank, is not an easy path. I did lose a lot of friends along the way. I'm sure we all have. You know, these are uncomfortable topics. These are topics that people don't necessarily love talking about. Anyway, I really took the decision at a certain point that I wanted to create a certain community around myself. You know, it started as actually a very self-interested initiative. I want to be able to have those depths of conversation with people that I know in real life. And I kind of came to the conclusion that the only way to do that was to help people learn and to point people in the way of great resources, the Sailor Academy resource, for example, Bitcoin is for everybody, the Bitcoin Standard, obviously, certain podcasts I was coming up against. I just really wanted to be able to discuss these things with people. So I started kind of educating people around me. And the more I did it, the more questions I got. So I actually started holding fairly regular, I created a Telegram group for the area that I live in. And I started holding quite regular Bitcoin meetups just for local businesses, for anybody who was interested, for anybody who had questions. I would say, look, I can help you. I often did it on a one-to-one basis because I'm really genuinely interested in starting circular economies. I think it's a really beautiful idea. I mean, do not comply, right? Let's start to try to think about how we can interact and transact with one another without the long sticky fingers of the governments or the credit card countries or companies or Western Union reaching in there to take a cut or to say, no, you can't transact, you don't have the right credit score. You know, being able to cut out that kind of noise and just be able to exercise our basic human right of transacting with one another. So I started, look, I'm not going to lie to you, it's been slow progress. It's not easy starting a circular economy. Yep. The way it looks, what it looks like for me at the moment is that I have orange pilled a certain number of businesses who I transact with on a really regular basis. So, for example, my daughter's surf teacher now takes Bitcoin. I'm working on getting my butcher to take Bitcoin. My massage therapist accepts Bitcoin. There's a number of small businesses in my area who it's gradually catching on with. In an ideal world, that I felt a strong desire to scale up, and that just being here by myself and reaching certain people within my geographical context was good, but it wasn't great. That I really wanted to reach beyond that and see if I could. I guess the frustration that I came up against a little bit is that I felt like online there are some amazing resources, right? If you want to learn about Bitcoin, there are some amazing resources. For me, the problem a little bit with these resources is that they're designed for people who have heard about Bitcoin, who are interested in Bitcoin, and who are prepared to dedicate quite some time to learning about Bitcoin. So, for example, I'm completely in love with the Sailor Academy course. I think it's amazing. But in order, it's a long time. It's a lot of hours that you need to dedicate to it if you actually want to complete it. So there was part of me that wanted to kind of bridge the gap between people who've either never heard of Bitcoin or who have heard a little bit about Bitcoin and have some curiosity, but are not yet at a stage at which they would say, yes, I'm at the point in which I'm going to go online and look for what's out there and dedicate quite some time and attention to really educating myself on it. So I have a former colleague from a previous incarnation of mine, when I was working on counterterrorism, actually. And he and I, we always worked very well together. He's a trainer, a very good trainer. And he started showing some interest in Bitcoin. Instead, he just fell down the rabbit hole at like rocket speed. I've never seen anybody orange pilled themselves at such an incredible pace. And I get these messages from him at 4 o'clock in the morning, like, oh my God, Holly, I've just learned about the banking crash of 2000. I can't believe I knew that. So I started sending him all this stuff. And so we really reconnected about that. We've always worked very well together. And he said to me at some point, look, I I would love to work with you again. And he came up with some ideas from his current position, but I wasn't so, I kind of looked for a way in which we could introduce Bitcoin. And from introducing Bitcoin, it's become a whole Bitcoin education project of its own. It's very ambitious. We call ourselves Bitonomy because what we would really like to do is just rocket fuel Bitcoin adoption and create Bitcoin economies and support autonomy, which, you know, as you'll know very well, Bitcoin is a perfect tool to do. So we started out with this idea that what we wanted to do was educate people in places where it's going to really have an impact. So he had some great contacts in Africa, but also back in the UK, which is where he and I are both from. So we just launched this idea and we started putting feelers out amongst our networks, basically. And immediately, there's so much hunger for knowledge. There is so much hunger for knowledge. Mm. So we've really landed on our feet. I'm delighted to be able to say that in collaboration with another organization called Groundswell, which is based in London, we've received a first little bit of funding from the Human Rights Foundation. Yeah. To educate diaspora communities in London. So I'm so excited about this. I'm actually leaving on Friday to go to deliver some education to people. I believe that the diasporas are from Somalia and Eritrea. And these are people who are sending remittances home currently through Western Union. And the people that they're sending these remittances home to are the unbanked. These people are the vast majority of unbanked people. And, you know, I just feel if you're using Western Union to send your remittances home, I have a better solution. And I think that we can approach that through this very practical lens. I'm not planning to go there and say, this is going to change the world. This is the future money. I'm going to go there and say, I have a much cheaper option, a faster option, an option which allows the people back where you're sending these remittances to receive these finances like this. They don't have to be banked. They can transact with it amongst themselves. Look, it's ambitious, and I know there's an ideology there. I know there are holes in this. I know we're going to have to think about how those people back home can buy their food with the Bitcoin that's being sent home. We're going to have to look at storage options. We're going to have to talk to a lot more people. We're going to have to build this out further. But these are the people for whom Bitcoin can be life-changing. We're running up against issues, interesting issues, technological issues. I'll come back to that in a moment. So that's one project, and that's up and running, and it's got some funding, and I'm delighted because up until now, I've just self-financed. I just do this on a voluntary basis, right? And I love to do it like that. But it's limiting. There's only so much I can do. There's only so many people I can reach. I need more collaborators. I need people who can help me. And we need to be able to build. I'm quite ambitious when it comes to this. It's just so important to me. So I was also delighted to hear back from an organization in Kenya where my colleague has some good contacts. They're called Youth Alive Kenya. They're a super interesting organization. So their whole objective is to empower youth. So they have all kinds of various branches, professional training, personal training. They also have a financial training wing, and that's where they would like to work together with me. I was actually quite surprised. I didn't realize that Kenya is one of the biggest growing Bitcoin economies. And I'm so excited to be able to work with them on this project. Our vision there is to really seed some circular economies, hopefully by getting some donations in. That's what we're working on. But also there's a philosophical kind of a social aspect to that too. What I really notice is that I'm so effective in orange pilling people here in Portugal where I live because I'm a part of the community. I don't think it really works for people, foreigners especially, to sail in and say, hey, I've got all the answers to your financial problems. What I want to do is really train some bright sparks, some inspirational young people in those areas. They work with these people. They can identify these people, spokespeople, if you want, who will then, I will train them through Youth Alive Kenya, and it's got a great reach. We're looking to reach more than 5,000 young people with this training. So we'll train some spokespeople. They'll then go out and spread this training in the areas that they live in. And I'm so excited about it. I really think these are young people who are both looking to build businesses themselves, also looking to build their own professional skills. Say some of these young people are learning how to become a graphic designer or whatever, a skill which is marketable on the internet. They could be then marketing their services to anywhere in the world through Bitcoin. I mean, it's a growing market. It's a very exciting opportunity, I think, for them.
No, I love that. And congratulations on the grant. That is super exciting to be able to start now making, some of these a reality. And I love the approach you're taking of like, look, we don't have all the answers. And even in my personal experience in Uvita and Bitcoin Jungle, where I think they've done a tremendous job of building this grassroots community bit by bit, right? Going in person, face to face, sitting with merchants, talking to them about their real problems and how Bitcoin can solve for that. And as you sort of suggested, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? It is not the easiest thing to do. There are still growing pains. I think we learned a lot of stuff about the Lightning Network and where it can be really effective and where it potentially has some pitfalls, especially as it relates to self-custodial usage. So there are some very kind of thorny questions and problems that the community is still wrestling with. But the more experimentation we see, the more partners coming in, the more that we're going to learn about how to solve these problems in reality. And so it's really, really cool what you're doing with those two projects that you mentioned.
Thank you. I'm super excited about it. And, also in looking at the technological issues that we're facing, I've received such wonderful support from the Bitcoin community. At one point, I had a web designer build my web page, which I need to update with news about these two projects. But so I had a website built for Bitonomy, and I really wanted, when I accept donations from people, I want it to be in Bitcoin, right? I mean, I think that's appropriate. So just the headache of trying to find out how you get a Bitcoin, a donations button onto a website. Oh gosh, I got to a point of I was ready to throw my laptop off my balcony, I swear. At a certain point, I was going crazy. I was watching these videos by BTC Sessions. I love his videos. I think he's amazing. He's just so clear. But I still couldn't figure it, and it wasn't working. And eventually I contacted him and said, look, I'm having, can you help? And I just had input. He was amazing. He helped me figure out what the problem was. There was a mismatch between my BTC Pay server and my Phoenix wallet. So he helped me to figure out the details behind that and to install something else. And I had input from so many great Bitcoiners, such patient, thorough support from these people. But look, it's the early stages, and I think it's important that we're honest about that. I also don't want to go to places like Kenya and sell a product which is not solid. So I really want to, I mean, not that I'm selling anything, but you know what I mean, promote the use of a wallet or whatever it is that's not stable, that's not solid. So you've got to be careful about what you select and what you recommend to people. But I'm just super excited about it. These are problems, we'll work through them. It might not be completely simple, but we'll work through them. And this is the way we rocket fuel Bitcoin adoption. We rocket fuel demand for great products that just work. I really saw that happening in El Salvador with the Chivo wallet, which was quite difficult there were lots of glitches. There were problems. It was not well integrated. There were times when it worked great. There were times when it didn't work at all. But because of the demand there, you start seeing these things, these thorny problems being combed out. More and more people come to work on these things, and I just think it's incredible. I'm so grateful that there are people like yourself, Ian, who are working on technical solutions to these problems. And I don't know if you realize how important it is what you're doing, and how much people like myself really appreciate it.
No, it takes a whole global village, I suppose, as the analogy goes. But no, I love that, Holly. Just being mindful of time here. If people are listening to this and they're like, yes, I agree that we need to be doing these things. How can they follow your guys' progress? How can they potentially contribute? Are there ways that they can contribute now or potentially in the future? Support you guys? Where would you sort of guide folks to go?
Definitely, definitely. Please come and find me. Come and talk to me. I love talking about this. I love talking Bitcoin. I will definitely respond to anybody who contacts me. Come and find me on Twitter. I'm Midsummer21 million on Twitter. Same on Noster. Come and visit the Bitonomy website, which is bitonomy.org. There's a donate button there. Zap me some sats. It will all go towards. We've got the London project covered by the wonderful grant that we've received. But we're looking for donations to fund our work in Kenya. I'm delighted. I check once in a while and I see, these donations coming in. Some are even just a few cents, but it all helps. It all helps. And it gives a clear message that people are behind this work. I'm very excited for that. So come zap me some sats on bitonomy.org. There's a donate button, or just come and say hi on Twitter or on Nostr. I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to interact.
Awesome. No, and I know, and the more people that are thinking about these topics, going out into their local communities, trying to orange pill merchants, wherever they are in the world, the more learnings we have, the more we're able to bounce these learnings off of each other, the faster I think we're going to get to those solutions, not just technical, but also the behavioral aspects of all of this. So Holly, thank you once again for coming on and sharing a little bit about Bitonomy. I know it's early days still, but I think it is a really, really exciting project. I'm excited you guys are getting some support, and hopefully folks watching have learned a little bit and can start thinking about some of these topics as well. So Holly, we'll have to do another version of this at some point in the future. Thanks for coming on.
I'd love to. Thanks so much for the invitation, Ian. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. And as just a last message to anybody listening to this, I'd say we all have a responsibility in this. Go out there and talk to people, teach people about Bitcoin, make the businesses that you interact with the most, make them Bitcoin friendly. That's how it's going to spread. That's one of the ways it's going to spread. Let's all do our bit.
100%. All right, Holly, we'll go ahead and leave things here.
Thank you so much, Ian. Good night.